Hey, thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone, and welcome to my channel. Today we have a 2003 Chevy Truck with a 5.3, and this truck has an intermittent check engine light. Now the codes for this are pretty common among all manufacturers. So the codes we have are a P0171 mass airflow sensor circuit out of range. Also, we have a P0171 and a P0174. That is saying that bank 1 and bank 2 are both too lean. Now, if you have a 4-cylinder engine or an inline engine, you may only have a P0171 because you only have one upstream oxygen sensor. So what that means, bank 1, bank 2, is that one bank has an oxygen sensor and the other bank has an oxygen sensor. So like older GMs, the 3.8s and things like that, they would have two exhaust manifolds. They would come around as a Y and then come out the back, and there'd be one oxygen sensor and then a cat and another oxygen sensor. So in those engines, bank 1 is the whole engine because there's only one upstream oxygen sensor. If you have an oxygen sensor for both banks, then it has a bank 1 and a bank 2. BMWs have a bank 1 is a cylinder 1, 2, 3, and they have an oxygen sensor, and bank 2 is cylinder 4, 5, 6. So that's how you can determine how many banks you have and what bank they're talking about. You really need to know. If you have one bank and it's a V6 and one bank is the whole engine, then you have to think about that. If you have a P0171 and not a P0174 and only one bank is lean, then you're looking at what's wrong with that one bank. Anyways, so we're going to get into this and we're going to talk about how to test this on any vehicle. So, all right, before we do that, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell. You get notified of all my future content, which you definitely don't want to miss. All right, let's go check it out. All right, here we have a 2003 Chevy Silverado with 270,000 miles. This one has an on and off check engine light. All right, so here's the codes that I pulled. A P0101 mass airflow sensor circuit out of range, a P0171 and a P0174, both banks lean. So what you want to do when you have these codes is you want to pull freeze frame data because you need to know, is it idling? Is it cruising? Is it under extreme load? Things like that. All right. So here's what I pulled right here. The code set around 3,000 RPMs and had a close to 90 grams per second. Long-term fuel trims were at plus 25% and short terms were at 3 and 5. So now this, you could throw a mass airflow sensor at it and hopefully you're right. But it could also be a restricted fuel filter. It could be a weak fuel pump. So we're going to test it. Now, how do we do that? It's not super difficult. So you're going to get your scan tool and you're going to graph engine speed, mass airflow. You don't need the load PID. I like it because it tells me a lot, and I'll explain it after we do the test. And then you want to scope both of your O2, your upstream O2 sensors. Now, ideally, you need the coolant temp to be at operating temperature for this test to be efficient. So we're going to let this truck warm up and we're going to go do a test on it. All right. The most important thing is that you use a graphing scan tool because you see here how my RPMs started. The lowest RPMs were 435 and the highest were 1455. Well, you're not going to be able to see where it actually is on the graph. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and we're going to clear the scan tool readings. So now what we're going to do, now we have a fully warmed up engine. We're going to put this thing in drive and we're going to go wide open throttle until it shifts. As soon as it shifts, we're going to hit the pause button. And then I'll show you what we're going to do with that data. Okay, so I just performed the VE test and these are my readings right here. So we had 5,045 RPMs. The mass airflow hit 181.07 grams per second. The engine load only went to 74%. And now this is why I use the oxygen sensors. So here you can see that bank 1 I was at 907 millivolts. Bank 2 was at 898 millivolts. A fully rich system will read 900 millivolts. So this tells us that the O2 sensors pegged out full rich. You can see it right there. They went full rich, okay? Now that is really important because this tells us whether we're going to go the direction of fuel or whether we're going to go the direction of mass airflow, things like that. Now, I did a VE test on this thing, and I'll show you the results. And the results were 66.46% efficient. So that is very, very low. Let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so here is the VE test after the mass airflow sensor was replaced. So as you can see here, we have similar RPM. The grams per second prior was 181.07. Now we're at 218.57. The load was at 74%. Now we're at 87% load. And our O2 sensors are still 900 millivolts. So this one is going to be good. The VE for this one was 87%, I believe. So when we talk about lean conditions, the one thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you look at the freeze frame for when the code's set. Now this is very important because a lot of times, like Fords for instance, this actually happens a lot on Fords. You'll get a P0171 and not a P0174. And so I've seen a lot of techs just start looking at bank 1. Looking at bank 1, trying to figure out why it's lean. They don't pay attention to the freeze frame. They don't look at anything. So if you look at the freeze frame, 9 times out of 10 on a Ford, you're going to look at it and you're going to see bank 1 is at 32%, long-term fuel trim, and bank 2 is at, let's say, 27.9% long-term fuel trim. So bank 2 was about to set a code, but it hadn't coded when bank 1 set. So there you go. Both banks are lean. Just that one bank is slightly behind the other. The other thing the reason you want to look at freeze frame also is because you need to look at the RPMs. Was the vehicle at idle? Was it driving? And was it under heavy load? You also want to look at the coolant temp. What was the temperature? The load of the engine. The load of the engine is going to tell you whether it's, let's say it's at 2,850 RPMs, but the load is at 10%. That means that they've let off the throttle. All right. And the other thing that you want to look at in newer vehicles is seconds since start. So that's very important. I just looked at something recently. Forgot what it was. Oh, it was an EcoDiesel, and it was 786 seconds, and I think that calculated out to 13 minutes. So I knew that 13 minutes after they started driving, it set the code. So those are really important that you want to know. Now, with lean codes, you want to be careful because it could be vacuum leaks, it could be fuel volume, it could be a mass airflow sensor, it could be all sorts of things. Anything that allows unmetered air could cause these codes. Now, you want to be careful when you test for this because if you hook up a fuel gauge, let's say this Chevy Truck that we're talking about, I hook up a fuel gauge, and this actually happens on Fords. It's actually pretty common on Fords. You hook up a fuel gauge, let's say the fuel pressure is supposed to be 53 PSI. And you hook it up and cool, we're at 53 PSI. It's not fuel. And so then you go about chasing everything other than fuel. Well, the reason that we used the oxygen sensors in our testing is because fuel actually still could be the culprit. You could have fuel pressure and not enough fuel volume. So you could have a restricted fuel filter. Allows enough fuel pressure to test, but when you need the fuel, it can't flow. So that's why it's really important to check that. So let's get it. Okay, so now that you've watched this video, know you can go to the Google Play Store. I'm pretty sure it's available in the Apple Store, but I know Google Play. You can get this ATG calculator. This is the best volumetric efficiency calculator I have found. I like it on my phone because when I go get a car and it's got lean codes, I do a quick visual under the hood. Do I see anything that's off? No. Cool. I go to a straightaway and I set it up and I run and I drive it, and as soon as it shifts, I stop, I pause it, I stop, I pull over, I write down the results, I get out my phone, boom, volumetric efficiency. Do I have a problem? Yes or no? So then I know if I need to test it more, if I need to do anything else. So now one thing to know about volumetric efficiency testing is that if you have a turbo or a supercharged engine, okay, then the results are not going to be as high as you would think. Those are much more difficult to use a volumetric efficiency test on. So naturally aspirated engines, all day long, use this test, and what you're basically doing is testing the engine to see how well it can breathe. Now, if you have one bank of fuel trims way low and the other bank way high, don't do this test, because that means that you probably have like a cap that's restricted, things like that. So anyways, now that you've watched this video, I hope that you feel comfortable testing for lean codes, performing a volumetric efficiency test, and fixing the vehicle properly without it coming back, and knowing that you're not just throwing a mass airflow sensor at it, which is what most people do. So thanks for watching the video. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell. You get notified of all my future content, which you definitely don't want to miss. Also, check me out on Instagram at Nuts and Bolts with Tone for my daily life as a mechanic. Also, check out my merchandise store where you can get a t-shirt or a coffee cup. Support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.